The rain had stopped hours ago, but the smell of wet earth still hung in the air when she said it soft, broken, trembling. I removed it. Please. Her hands shook as she spoke, her voice almost lost to the wind scraping through the dry mesquite. The rancher froze. Every muscle in his body went still. For a moment, the world around them, the restless horses, the ticking of rainwater off the tin roof, faded into silence. Then he turned, slow as judgment, eyes narrowing as they found hers. She stood there barefoot in the mud, her dress torn at the shoulder, her hair plastered to her face, her breath coming shallow. She was crying without sound, like someone who'd run out of tears hours before. He didn't move closer, didn't speak, just looked at her. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he reached for the Colt on his hip, and that's when she whispered it again, please, before her knees gave out and she dropped into the dirt. The rancher hesitated, then made his move. 2 days earlier, Maddox Hale had been alone, riding fence along the north pasture when he first saw the smoke. He'd spent most of his life alone, truth be told. A war veteran turned cattleman, he was a man who spoke less than he thought and trusted even fewer. Folks in town said Maddox had the kind of stare that made you rethink your choices, and they weren't wrong. He carried the quiet weight of a man who'd buried too many things, some in the ground, some in his heart. The fire was a mile out, curling black against the horizon. Not a ranch fire too wild, too untamed. Maddox nudged his bay forward, his rifle slung loose in the saddle scabbard. The air smelled of pitch and something else, gunpowder, maybe. As he rode closer, the shape of a wagon came into view, or what was left of one. The wheels were splintered, the canopy gone. The horses had scattered. A man lay face down in the dirt beside it, his shirt dark with blood. Maddox dismounted, crouched low. The man was already gone, but there were tracks, small ones, leading away from the wreckage into the brush. He followed them without hesitation. The trail wound through the rocks, over the dry creek bed, up into the narrow pass that split the hills like a scar. The sun was sinking low by the time he found her. She was huddled beneath a ledge, clutching a small satchel like it was life itself. When he approached, she didn't scream or run, just stared at him with those gray-green eyes, wide and hollow. He'd seen that look before on soldiers who'd seen too much. "Ma'am," he said quietly, keeping his distance. "You hurt?" She blinked, lips trembling. "Who are you?" "Name's Hale. I run cattle a few miles south." Her gaze darted past him, scanning the hills. "Are they still out there?" "Who?" he asked. She swallowed hard, fingers digging into the satchel. "The men." That's when he saw it, the faint bruise on her neck, the torn hem of her skirt, the way her hands trembled but her eyes never looked away. Whatever had happened here, she wasn't just a survivor. She was hunted. Maddox's instinct told him to walk away. Whatever this woman was tangled in, it wasn't his fight. But something in her voice, fragile but fierce, anchored him. Maybe it was the echo of his own ghosts. Or maybe it was just the way she said his name when he helped her to her feet. They rode back to his ranch in silence, the only sounds the creak of leather and the wind sighing through the cedars. She sat behind him, clutching his coat like it was a lifeline. When they reached the ranch house, dusk had fallen hard. He lit a lamp and poured her water. She drank in small, desperate sips. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara," she whispered. "Where were you headed?" Her eyes flickered. "Nowhere that matters anymore." He didn't press. Instead, he set a blanket by the fire and gave her space. Maddox wasn't much for conversation, but he knew the look of someone who'd been through hell. He'd seen it too many times not to recognize it. So he let her be. That night, he sat out on the porch with his rifle across his knees, watching the dark hills. Coyotes cried somewhere far off. The stars looked sharp enough to cut. He'd thought he'd left violence behind when he traded his uniform for a saddle, but he could feel it in the wind. Trouble was coming. Just before dawn, the sound of hooves woke him. Not his horses, these were lighter, Faster. He moved quick, slipped inside, found Clara standing by the window, pale and wide-eyed. They found me, she said. He didn't waste a second. Down, he ordered, motioning her away from the window. He moved to the rifle rack, loaded a fresh round, and peeked through the shutters. 3 riders were crossing the ridge, keeping low, their silhouettes black against the early light. They were professionals the way they moved. Told him that much. "You gonna tell me what this is about?" he asked. Her breath hitched. "I took something from them." "What kind of something?" She hesitated. "A ring." He frowned. "You're telling me 3 armed men burned a wagon and killed a man over jewelry?" "It's not just a ring," she whispered. "It's proof." "Proof of what?" She didn't answer, just stared at the floor, her hands twisting the fabric of her dress. Maddox didn't need to know the details yet. What mattered was simple: these men weren't leaving without her, or without a fight. He moved fast. "Cellar door, behind the stove." "Go." She started to argue, but he cut her off. "Do as I say." He stepped out onto the porch, cocked the lever on his rifle, and waited. The riders stopped about 50 yards out. The man in front wore a black duster and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning," the man called out. "We're looking for someone." "Lady, mid-20s, green eyes, might have come through here. Don't know anyone like that," Maddox said, voice flat. The man tilted his head. "Mind if we take a look?" "I do." The smile faded. "Now, that ain't neighborly." Maddox's finger brushed the trigger guard. "I'm not much of a neighbor." For a moment, nobody moved. Then the man in the duster gave a small nod. 2 of his riders split off, circling wide. Maddox took aim and fired first. The crack split the morning, echoing off the hills. 1 rider dropped clean from his saddle. The second ducked low, firing back as he spurred his horse toward cover. Maddox moved off the porch, keeping low, reloading fast. He'd fought enough skirmishes to know rhythm mattered more than panic. He waited, let them make the next move. A shot whistled past his ear, close enough to singe. He dove behind the trough, splinters flying. His next round caught the second man's thigh, sent him screaming to the ground. The man in the duster cursed and turned his horse, retreating up the ridge. Maddox didn't chase. He knew better. There'd be more coming, and he needed to be ready. When he finally stepped back inside, Clara was still there, clutching the satchel to her chest. Her eyes darted to the blood on his sleeve. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Not mine," he said. "Now, you gonna tell me what's really going on?" She opened the satchel slowly. Inside was a small velvet pouch and a folded document. Maddox frowned. The paper bore a seal, territorial, official-looking. He didn't read it right away. He just looked at her. "They killed my husband," she said quietly. "He worked for the governor's office in Santa Fe. He found out something he wasn't supposed to. Land deeds, forged signatures, bribes, everything tied back to the same men who own half this territory. He tried to expose them. They sent riders, instead." She paused, voice trembling. "He told me to run. Said if I couldn't reach the marshal, to find someone who wouldn't sell me out. Someone honest." Maddox leaned back against the wall, jaw tight. "And you think that's me?" Her eyes met his. "You didn't have to stop for me back there. But you did." For the first time, he looked at her differently, not as a burden, but as a test. He'd spent years trying to outrun who he was, trying to live quiet. But the world had a way of dragging you back into the fight. Outside, thunder rolled again, low and distant. The storm hadn't passed after all. Maddox reloaded his rifle and looked at her. "If they're who I think they are, they won't stop. You'll need to leave by morning." "I can't," she said softly. "Not until it's over." He studied her, seeing something in her eyes: grief, yes, but also grit, maybe even a kind of defiance. He understood that look too. "Then we end it here," he said. She nodded, silent, steady. But later that night, while he was checking the horses, she disappeared. No note, no trail, just gone like smoke, carried off by the wind. When Maddox found the cellar empty, he didn't curse, didn't shout, just stood there, staring at the open door, the faint echo of her voice still hanging in the dark. I removed it, please. And in that moment, he realized something. She hadn't run away from danger. She'd gone straight toward it. By dawn, Maddox was already in the saddle. The storm clouds had broken, but the ground still steamed from last night's rain, and the sky was the color of gunmetal. He followed the track's small prints, light on the ground, moving fast but steady. Clara wasn't panicked. She was determined. That worried him more than anything. People running scared made mistakes you could predict. People with purpose were dangerous. The North Ridge rose like a spine of broken stone, scarred with mesquite and jagged cedar. Maddox had ridden those hills before. It was rough country, no law, no mercy, just miles of dust and men who'd sold their souls cheap. The tracks led straight that way. He pushed his horse harder, the wind biting cold against his face. By mid-morning, he reached a bluff that overlooked the old mining valley. Below lay the ghost town of Calvert's Hollow, a scattering of half-rotted buildings, a busted saloon, and an abandoned shaft that hadn't seen gold in 20 years. But smoke was rising from one of the shacks, not cooking smoke, campfire smoke, controlled, measured. Someone was down there. Through his spyglass, Maddox counted 3 horses tied out front, and a fourth a bay mare he recognized as his own. His jaw clenched. Then he saw her. Clara. She was sitting against a post, hands bound in front, head bowed. A man in a black duster stood over her, the same one from yesterday. Another paced near the fire, cleaning a revolver. The third was watching the ridge, eyes scanning the horizon. Maddox ducked lower. He'd fought enough ambushes to know better than to rush in. He waited, watching. The men spoke, but the wind carried only fragments. Marshall's on his way. Paper's gone. She knows where it is. Maddox frowned. The paper, whatever was in that satchel, must have been more than evidence. It was leverage. And Clara, God help her, had walked right back into their hands to keep them from taking it. He eased his rifle from its scabbard, checked the chamber, and whispered to himself, "All right, Clara, let's end this right." He moved down the slope, slow and quiet. Every step was deliberate. The sun was climbing, throwing hard light across the valley. One wrong move, and he'd be silhouetted against the ridge. When he reached the bottom, he stayed to the shadows, circling around to the rear of the shack. Inside, he could hear them talking clearer now. "You're a fool," the man in the duster said, his tone smooth, cruel. "All you had to do was hand it over. Now you got good men dead, and for what? You think the law cares? The law works for us." Clara's voice came, low but steady. "Maybe. But the truth doesn't." The man laughed. "Truth don't buy bullets, sweetheart." A thud followed. Something struck. Maddox's grip tightened on the rifle. He took a breath, let it out slow, and peered through a crack in the wall. The man in the duster had hit her across the face. Blood ran from her lip, but her eyes didn't waver. She spat at his boots. That was all Maddox needed to see. He kicked open the back door and fired. The man nearest the fire went down before he even turned. The other spun, reaching for his gun. But Maddox was already moving. His second shot blew the revolver clean from the man's hand. He grabbed Clara, cut the rope binding her wrists, and shoved her behind a table. The man in the duster dove behind a pillar, firing wild. Bullets shattered bottles and kicked up dust. Maddox ducked low, returning fire in short, calm bursts. The man cursed, trying to flank him, but Maddox was faster. He caught a glimpse of the duster's boot under the beam, aimed, and squeezed. The man screamed as the bullet tore through his leg. Silence fell, thick and sudden. Then the man's voice came again, ragged but still proud. "You don't know what you're doing, Hale. You think this ends here? You've just signed your death paper. There's a list of men, big men, who'll see you buried before sundown. Maddox stepped from cover, rifle leveled. Then I'll need a shovel. The man laughed once, a dry, broken sound, and lunged. Maddox fired, one clean shot to the chest. The echo rolled through the hollow, bouncing off the hills like thunder. Then it was over. For a moment, all Maddox could hear was the ringing in his ears and Clara's uneven breathing. He turned. She was kneeling beside the table, staring at the body. Tears cut clean lines down her dirt-streaked face. "It's done," he said. She shook her head. "No, it's just beginning." He didn't argue. Instead, he helped her to her feet. "Come on. We need to get you out before anyone else comes sniffing." She hesitated, then reached down and pulled something from the dead man's coat pocket, a folded letter, sealed with the same emblem as the one in her satchel. She stared at it, expression unreadable. "What is it?" Maddox asked. "Names," she said softly. "All the men tied to the bribes. Judges, sheriffs, land agents, even the governor's deputy. My husband copied everything." Maddox took the letter, slipped it into his coat. "We'll give it to the marshal." She looked at him, then really looked at him. "You trust him?" He thought about that for a long moment. "Not sure I trust anyone anymore. But it's the only move we got." They rode out just as the sun broke full over the ridge. The valley glowed gold, but there was nothing peaceful in it. The air still smelled of blood and smoke. Maddox didn't say much on the trail. Clara rode behind him again, her silence heavy, but not hopeless. Whatever else she'd lost, she'd found something new in herself, steel, maybe, the kind that only fire can forge. By the time they reached the outskirts of town, the streets were quiet, too quiet. Maddox slowed his horse, scanning the storefronts. The marshal's office sat at the far end, its flag limp in the still air. He could see movement inside, a shadow pacing. He dismounted, motioned for Clara to stay back, and walked to the door. It opened before he could knock. Marshal Evers was a tall man, broad-shouldered, eyes sharp as razors. He looked at Maddox, then at the woman behind him. "Heard there was some trouble out north," he said casually. "You bring me part of it." "Maybe all of it," Maddox replied. He handed over the sealed letter. "You might want to read this somewhere private." Evers studied the seal, then looked up. "Where'd you get this?" "From a dead man who said you'd come looking." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then the marshal smiled, a small, crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well now, that's mighty interesting." Maddox's hand hovered near his belt. Clara stiffened behind him. The marshal's tone stayed calm, but his eyes had gone cold. "You should have burned this, Hale. Some rocks are better left unturned." Maddox took a step closer, voice low. "And some men shouldn't hide behind badges." Eva's gaze flicked to the window, and Maddox caught it, the faint reflection of movement outside. Boots. 2 men, maybe 3, flanking the doorway. He'd walked them straight into a trap. Clara's voice broke the silence. "You're one of them." The marshal didn't deny it. "Lady, I am the law here. And the law says that letter never sees daylight." Maddox's pulse slowed. The room shrank to the sound of his own breathing. He'd been here before, outnumbered, outgunned, but not out of fight. He gave a faint, tired smile. "Then I reckon the law's about to have a real bad day." The marshal's office felt too small for the 3 of them. Maddox stood near the door, his right hand brushing the worn grip of his Colt, every nerve alive. Clara stayed behind him, one step back, her face pale but eyes sharp. Marshal Evers moved slow around his desk, the folded letter still in his hand, his badge glinting faint in the morning light. "Now, let's not go making this difficult," Evers said, his voice smooth, deliberate. "I don't want blood on my floor. Why don't you 2 step outside? Let me take care of this little misunderstanding." Maddox didn't move. "You mean take care of us?" Evers smiled thin. "You're not as dumb as you look." Maddox's gaze flicked to the window again, 2 men outside, both armed. The marshal wasn't bluffing. He'd called in reinforcements fast, probably from the same gang Clara's husband had been chasing. The whole damn town might be in on it. The silence stretched tight, thick enough to choke on. Clara spoke first, her voice low but steady. My husband believed in men like you. Said the law was still worth something. Evers looked at her, almost pitying. Your husband didn't understand how things work here. He thought justice was blind. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. But out here, justice wears the face of whoever's holding the gun. Maddox shifted his weight slightly, drawing Eva's attention. You talk too much, he said. The marshal's smirk froze as Maddox moved. In one fluid motion, he drew his Colt and fired through the window without looking. The glass shattered, and a man outside dropped like a sack of grain. The second guard fired back, the bullet punching through the wall inches from Clara's head. Maddox turned, firing twice more, one round through the door, one through the desk. The room erupted in chaos. Evers dove for cover behind a filing cabinet, cursing. Maddox grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her low. Back door, he hissed. She nodded, scrambling behind him as splinters rained from the walls. Eva's voice rang out, angry and wild. You're done, Hale. You hear me? You're finished. Maddox shoved the back door open and they ran into the alley, the sound of boots pounding behind them. The street beyond was half empty, folks peeking from windows, watching but not daring to interfere. He yanked Clara behind a stack of barrels. We need horses. They'll be waiting at the stables, she said, catching her breath. Then we take the long way. They cut through the narrow alleys behind the saloon, past the blacksmith's shop and down toward the freight yard. Every step echoed like a gunshot in the morning stillness. Maddox checked their back trail. No sign yet, but he knew they were coming. Men like Evers didn't take embarrassment well. They slipped into the yard, the air thick with the smell of hay and iron. A train sat idling on the tracks, steam hissing. Crew nowhere in sight. Boxcar, Maddox said, nodding toward it. Clara climbed up first, gripping the cold metal handle. He boosted her, then swung in behind, pulling the door halfway shut. Inside was darkness and the faint clatter of loose chains. They crouched low, listening. The sound of shouting drifted from town, growing fainter with every passing second. Clara's hands shook slightly as she pushed her hair back. You didn't have to do that for me, she said. Maddox looked at her in the dim light. You think I did it for you? She met his eyes. Then why? He thought about that, jaw tightening. Because someone's got to. They rode the train only a few miles before jumping off near the foothills. Maddox knew a safe route west, a narrow trail that wound through canyons where riders couldn't follow easy. By afternoon, they stopped near an abandoned windmill. He started a small fire, careful to keep the smoke low. Clara sat quiet for a long time, staring at the flames. Finally, she spoke. There's something you should know. Maddox looked up from cleaning his rifle. Go on. That ring I told you about, she said slowly. It wasn't just evidence. It belonged to one of them, the governor's own brother. My husband took it from his office after he found out what they were doing. He said if anything happened, I should destroy it. But I couldn't. Why not? She looked at him, tears glinting. Because it wasn't just proof. It was a promise. He said as long as I had it, they'd keep coming. They'd show who they really were. Maddox tossed a stick into the fire. Well, seems he was right about that. She smiled faintly, broken but brave. I didn't mean for you to get caught in this. He gave a low chuckle. Lady, I was born caught in things that weren't my fault. They sat in silence a while, the wind whispering through the grass. Then Maddox heard something, distant hooves, faint but real. He stood, scanning the ridge. They found us. Clara rose too, clutching the satchel tight. What do we do? He slung his rifle over his shoulder. You ride west. There's a place called Dry Creek, 10 miles out. Go there. Find a man named Hollis. He owes me a favor. And you. I'll keep them busy. She shook her head fiercely. No, I'm not leaving you. He met her eyes, calm but firm. You will, if you want this to mean something. The hoofbeats grew louder. She hesitated, then stepped close, pressing something into his hand, the velvet pouch. If I don't make it, burn it. Don't let them have it. He looked down, feeling the weight of it, then nodded. Go. She climbed onto her horse, eyes glistening. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she turned and rode hard into the fading light. Maddox waited until she was gone, then walked to the crest of the hill. The riders were close now, 5 of them, led by a man in a gray hat, the one who'd escaped the firefight at the ranch. Maddox recognized the gait of his horse, the lazy sway of confidence that came from too much killing and too little consequence. He knelt, resting his rifle on a rock, and watched them approach. The first shot he fired dropped the led horse. The second took the rider beside him clean through the chest. The others scattered, shouting, firing wild. Maddox kept calm, working the lever smooth, methodical. He wasn't fighting to live, he was fighting to buy her time. When the last bullet in his chamber found its mark, he ducked back behind the rocks, breath heavy, blood singing in his ears. Smoke curled from the barrel, stinging his eyes. He'd hit 3, maybe 4. The 5th was still out there. A voice drifted through the dust. Hale, you can't stop it. You think one woman and one dead man's papers are gonna change this world? Maddox spat into the dirt. Don't care about changing the world, just aiming to ruin yours. The last outlaw charged from behind the rocks, gun blazing. Maddox turned, firing point blank. Both men went down hard, the echoes rolling across the empty hills. When the smoke cleared, Maddox pushed himself up, blood seeping through his shirt. He could barely see straight, but he smiled just a little. Somewhere far off, he thought he heard the distant rhythm of hooves heading west. He whispered to himself, "Ride hard, Clara. Don't look back." Then he slumped against the rocks, the setting sun painting the land in gold and red, like fire over heaven's edge. The trail west was long and cruel. Dust rose behind Clara's horse like smoke, and every hoofbeat echoed the same thought. Don't stop. Don't look back. The wind stung her eyes, drying the tears she'd been too proud to shed. By the time the sun touched the rim of the world, the sky burned orange, and the land stretched endless, harsh, empty, unforgiving. She had no map, no supplies beyond what Maddox had packed in her saddlebag, and no reason to believe this Hollis even existed. But she rode anyway, because if she stopped, his sacrifice would mean nothing. By midnight, the moon was high, throwing silver light across the canyon floor. Her horse stumbled, exhausted. She slid off, leading it on foot the last few miles until she saw it, a cluster of dim lights flickering in the valley below. Dry Creek. It wasn't a town so much as a refuge, 2 saloons, a general store, and a half-collapsed church that looked like it was held together by prayers that never got answered. She tied her horse behind the livery, pulled Maddox's coat tight around her shoulders, and walked toward the saloon. Inside, the room was half full, drifters, miners, and men who'd seen too much life to care about manners. The piano in the corner wheezed out something that might have been a song once. Clara stepped to the bar. "I'm looking for a man named Hollis," she said. The barkeep, a gray-bearded fellow with eyes like weathered coins, didn't answer right away. He poured her a drink instead, sliding the glass her way. "Depends who's asking." "Friend of Maddox Hale," she said quietly. That name did something. The barkeep's hand froze halfway to a rag. He looked her over slow, then leaned in. "Upstairs, room 3. Don't knock loud." Clara nodded, climbing the narrow stairs. The boards creaked under her boots. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar, candlelight flickering inside. A man sat at a table, back to her, broad shoulders, hair gone silver at the temples. He was cleaning a revolver with the calm precision of a man who'd done it all his life. "You're late," he said, without turning. Clara hesitated. "You're Hollis?" He looked up, one brow raised. Last I checked. His eyes met hers, blue, cold, assessing. You Maddox's girl. She stiffened. I'm not anybody's girl. He said you could help me. Hollis studied her face, then gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, Miss Clara, she said. All right, Clara, let's start simple. You bring what he said you would. She reached into her coat and placed the velvet pouch and the folded document on the table. Hollis didn't touch them at first, just stared like they were snakes waiting to bite. I lost good men over papers like that, he muttered. Then he opened the pouch, tilting it to the light. The ring gleamed gold, its seal engraved with a crest, the mark of the territorial governor. Hollis let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. What is it exactly? She asked. Proof, he said, that the governor's office has been signing off land titles to a railroad syndicate. Every acre from here to Santa Fe sold under fake names. Ranchers run off their land, miners killed for their claims, all under the guise of progress. Clara felt cold crawl up her spine. My husband found out. Hollis nodded, and they silenced him. You're lucky to still be breathing. She leaned forward, voice trembling but firm. Then let's make sure it counts for something. You said you lost men. Help me finish what they started. Hollis smiled, but it wasn't warm. Lady, you got guts. But you don't know what you're asking. Those men you're after, they own the courts. They own the army contracts, the telegraph lines, the newspapers. You walk into Santa Fe with that ring. They won't just kill you, they'll make it look like you never existed. Clara's jaw tightened. I've already buried everything I loved. I've got nothing left to lose. For a long time, Hollis said nothing. Then he nodded once, like a man surrendering to fate. All right then. Tomorrow we ride to White Rock. There's a telegraph station there that ain't under their thumb. We'll send copies to Washington, get the evidence in the right hands. Copies? She asked. He chuckled dry. You think I'm trusting my life to one letter? I'll make 5, and scatter 'em like buckshot. Let 'em try to plug all the holes. She gave a small, tired smile. Maddox would have liked you. At that, Hollis's expression darkened. Would've. Her eyes lowered. He bought me time. Hollis's hand tightened on the revolver. For a moment, he looked ready to break something. Then he just nodded, slow. He always did have a death wish wrapped in a good heart. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying Maddox's voice, that calm steadiness that somehow made the world seem survivable. She could almost hear him saying it again. Ride hard. Don't look back. But when dawn came, the first sound she heard wasn't a rooster or the wind. It was gunfire. She bolted upright, grabbing the satchel. Hollis was already at the door, gun drawn. Stay down, he ordered, pushing it open just enough to glance outside. 3 riders, coming fast. Damn it. They found us. Clara's heart hammered. How? He didn't answer. He kicked open the window instead, scanning the alley. We go now. They climbed out onto the slanted roof, as bullets cracked through the boards behind them. Hollis fired twice in return, dropping one man clean. They slid down the shingles, landing hard in the dust below. Mount up, he shouted. The horses were tied at the water trough. Clara swung into the saddle just as another shot split the air. The barkeep who'd helped them stumbled out, clutching his chest. Hollis fired again, covering their escape. Go, Clara. They tore through Dry Creek like ghosts chased by the devil. The street blurred. A bullet tore through her sleeve. Another whined past her ear. She didn't look back. When they finally reached open country, Hollis signaled left, toward the ridge. They rode hard, until the town was nothing but a smear of dust behind them. Keep low, he barked. The trail narrowed into a ravine, walls of rock rising on both sides. Clara's lungs burned, every breath sharp as glass. Finally, Hollis pulled up near an outcrop and swung off his horse. We make our stand here. She stared at him. Stand? We should keep moving. He shook his head. They'll track us till sundown. We stop 'em now, or we don't stop 'em at all. He loaded fresh rounds, movements precise, unhurried. She followed his lead, her hands trembling only once before steadying. The first rider appeared moments later, then another. Shadows on the rocks. Hollis took the first shot, the echo ripping through the canyon. Clara covered his flank, aiming low, hitting a horse's legs. The rider fell hard, dust rising like smoke. Gunfire thundered from both sides, the sound bouncing off stone like a storm in a box. Clara ducked behind a boulder, reloading. Hollis took a bullet to the shoulder but didn't slow. He fired one last time, then shouted, "Run! Get to the ridge." She hesitated, torn between fear and duty. Then she saw him fall, hit clean through the chest. The echo of it froze her heart. Clara ran to him, crawling through dust and blood. He looked up, eyes fading but fierce. "You keep that ring safe. You hear me? Don't trust anyone wearing a badge. I can't leave you." He gave a half smile. Didn't plan on coming back anyway. And then he was gone. The riders were regrouping, shouts growing louder. Clara snatched the pouch from the ground, slung it under her coat, and ran. The canyon narrowed to a slit, barely wide enough for her shoulders. She squeezed through, scraping her hands raw. On the other side, the world opened wide rolling plains, golden and endless. She climbed the ridge, lungs burning, until she could see for miles. Below, the gang searched the rocks. She crouched low, pulling the ring from the pouch. For a moment, she held it in her palm, the gold glinting under the sun like a cruel joke. So much death over something so small. Then she made her choice. She walked to the edge of the ridge, whispered, "For him," and hurled the ring into the canyon. It vanished into shadow. When she turned back, a figure was standing behind her. It was Maddox, or maybe what was left of him. His arm was bound with a strip of his shirt, his face lined with blood and dust, but his eyes, steady, burning, were unmistakable. "Thought I told you not to look back," he rasped. She stared, too stunned to speak. "You're alive." "Barely." He managed a crooked smile. "Guess I'm too damn stubborn to die proper." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the woman who refused to run, and the man who refused to quit. Then Maddox said, "We ain't done yet. That ring wasn't the only proof, was it?" She shook her head. "No. Hollis made copies. Then we've still got a chance." He offered his hand. She took it, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to hope. Behind them, thunder rolled again, or maybe it was gunfire. Either way, they didn't flinch. Maddox loaded his rifle, the familiar click echoing in the open air. "Time to finish what he started," he said. And together, they rode toward the horizon, the light breaking through storm clouds. Gold and fire all at once, the kind of light that only comes after everything's been burned clean. Santa Fe shimmered like a mirage when they rode in, two ghosts from the desert, one bleeding, one burning with purpose. Maddox's arm was wrapped in a torn shirt, his face drawn but steady. Clara's eyes had the kind of calm only grief could give. The city looked peaceful, but the air trembled with rot, the kind that hides behind polished walls and smiling lawmen. They didn't ride for the governor's mansion. They went straight to the telegraph office. Inside, the clerk froze when he saw the guns. Clara set the oil-sealed letters on the counter. "These go to Washington. Every line, every name." Her voice didn't shake. The clerk hesitated until Maddox laid his Colt flat on the wood, silent persuasion. The man swallowed hard and began typing. The keys clattered, metal on metal, sending the truth east faster than any bullet. By sundown, the whole town buzzed. The governor's name, the railroad bribes, the forged deeds, it all spilled through saloons and streets like spilled whiskey. By dawn, cavalry rode in from Fort Union. Men who'd worn fine coats the day before now wore chains. The flag above the Capitol hung limp, half torn, half redeemed. Maddox watched it from the edge of town, silent. Clara stood beside him, the rising sun painting her hair gold. "It's over," she said. He shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am. Just balanced for a while." They rode south before the crowds woke, following no trail but the wind's. By nightfall they camped near a dry riverbed, firelight flickering across their faces. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Maddox tossed a twig into the coals. "You live. Maybe I finally rest." She reached for his hand. "You saved more than me, Maddox." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you saved me right back." The desert around them was quiet, except for the crackle of the fire and the whisper of the wind moving on. Somewhere behind, justice was crawling to its feet, slow, bruised, but breathing. Under the endless stars, two weary souls sat together in the glow of a small flame, neither hunted, neither afraid. For the first time since it began, Clara closed her eyes without flinching. Maddox leaned back, feeling the weight finally lift. "Freedom," he murmured, "ain't running. It's staying put when the devil expects you to flee." And with that, the fire burned low, the night stretched wide, and the story of Maddox Hale and Clara Reed ended the way all true Westerns should, quietly, under a sky big enough to forgive them both.